What's going on here? Both of you have been here for a while.
We're eating, Sheriff. We're not bothering anyone.
Yes, you are. Where are you from? Where's your ID?
Why does that matter?
Because I'm asking.
That's not a reason.
See, that right there, that attitude, you walked up to us.
Yeah, now I need ID. For what?
Don't make this difficult.
You already
just
did.
crossed the
Then
line.
act like you understand.
There are moments in law enforcement where a single decision changes everything. And for Sheriff Harlan Crowley, that moment unfolded inside the Prairie Lantern Diner in Billings, Montana. What started as a routine afternoon quickly shifted when Crowley fixated on two men seated quietly at a corner table. They weren't causing a disturbance, they weren't breaking any laws, but within minutes his attention turned into suspicion, and his suspicion turned into action. Witnesses would later describe how the atmosphere in the diner changed the second he approached. His tone, his posture, the way he spoke. What could have ended as a simple interaction instead escalated into something far more serious, drawing the attention of everyone in the room. By the time it was over, statements had been taken, footage had surfaced, and questions were already being raised about how far authority had been pushed. Because the only thing more serious than what Sheriff Crowley did in that moment was who he chose to do it to. If you want to see how this situation unfolded and how it ended for him, make sure you subscribe and stay with the story, because every detail matters. Earlier that afternoon, Jerron Hayes had just finished a long drive into Billings. At 34, he was already established in his field, a civil rights attorney known for taking on cases involving police misconduct. He didn't talk about it much outside of court, but it showed in how he carried himself, calm, observant, and rarely reactive. Across from him sat Alonzo Whitaker, older, composed, and quiet in a way that made people listen when he did speak. He had the posture of someone used to being in control without raising his voice. The two had met earlier that day for work and stopped at the Prairie Lantern Diner to eat before heading back out. "Food's better than I expected," Jerron said, setting his fork down. Alonzo gave a small nod. "Small places usually are." Nothing about their table stood out. Two men, mid-conversation, plates half finished. But near the entrance, Sheriff Harlan Crowley had already noticed them. He didn't look away. Crowley had been with the department long enough to trust his instincts, or at least that's what he told himself. Over the years, those instincts had led to complaints. Most didn't go anywhere. A few were written off as misunderstandings. None of it had changed how he operated. From where he stood, he watched the table a little longer than necessary. His eyes moved over them once, then again, slower this time. Something about them, to him, didn't fit. A waitress passed by and glanced in the same direction, then quickly looked away. She recognized that look. It usually meant someone was about to be questioned. Back at the table, Jerron noticed it first. "Don't look now," he said quietly, "but we've got attention." Alonzo didn't turn immediately. From who? Jerron took a sip of his drink. Sheriff. That was enough. A few seconds later, boots moved across the diner floor, slow, deliberate. Conversations around the room began to thin out as people picked up on it. Crowley stopped at their table, standing just close enough to make it uncomfortable. He didn't greet them, didn't ask how they were doing. He looked directly at them, his expression already set. Then he spoke. "Mind telling me what you two are doing here?" The question hung there, heavier than it needed to be. Jerron Hayes looked up first, calm, measured. "Eating," he said, "same as everyone else." Sheriff Harlan Crowley didn't react to the answer. His eyes stayed on them, scanning, like he was waiting for something else, something that justified why he was standing there. "Yeah," Crowley replied, voice flat. "I can see that." A pause. Then he pulled out the chair at the end of the table slightly, just enough to make a point, but didn't sit. "How long you been here?" Jerron glanced at Alonzo Whitaker briefly before answering. "About 20 minutes." Crowley nodded slowly like he didn't believe it. "You from around here?" Alonzo answered this time, his tone steady. "We're passing through." Crowley shifted his weight, eyes narrowing just a bit. "Passing through," he repeated. "From where?" There was no urgency in his voice, but there was something else, something probing, unnecessary. Jaron leaned back slightly in his seat. Is there a reason you're asking? That was the first moment the tone changed. Crowley's jaw tightened, not enough for most people to notice, but enough. I'm the one asking questions, he said. You can answer them. A couple at a nearby booth went quiet. The waitress near the counter slowed down, pretending to wipe a surface that didn't need cleaning. At the table, Alonzo kept his hands folded in front of him. We haven't done anything wrong, he said, so if there's an issue, you can explain it. Crowley let out a short breath through his nose, like he'd expected that response. See, that's the thing, he said, leaning in slightly. I get calls about people who don't belong. I check it out. That's my job. Jaron's expression didn't change, but his eyes stayed locked on him. And what exactly made you think we don't belong? Crowley didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked around the diner briefly, at the other tables, the people watching without trying to look like they were watching, then back at them. You tell me. Silence. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but it was clear. Jaron let that sit for a second before speaking again. We're sitting here minding our business, that's it. Crowley's hand rested on the edge of the table now, not aggressive yet, but close. I'm gonna need to see your IDs, he said. There it was. Alonzo looked at him, calm as before. For what reason? Crowley's tone sharpened slightly. Because I'm asking. Jaron shook his head once, slow. That's not how that works. Another pause, this one longer. Crowley straightened up just a bit, eyes hardening now. All right, he said quietly, let's not make this more difficult than it needs to be. The room had gone completely still. Jaron didn't reach for anything, neither did Alonzo, and that seemed to bother him more than anything else. Crowley leaned in again, closer this time. I said, he repeated, voice lower now, I need to see your IDs. Jaron met his gaze without hesitation, and we're asking why. That was it. Something shifted. Not loud, not sudden, but enough. Crowley's hand pressed harder on the table, his posture changed, and for the first time since he walked over, his patience was gone. Stand up, he said. A beat. Then again, sharper this time. Both of you, now. No one moved. Jaron Hayes stayed seated, his hands still visible on the table. Alonzo Whitaker didn't shift either. The silence stretched just long enough to make the tension obvious to everyone watching. Jaron spoke first, voice controlled. We're not refusing to cooperate. We're asking you to explain what we've done. Sheriff Harlan Crowley didn't answer that. Instead, he stepped closer, close enough that the edge of the table pressed slightly into Jaron's side. His presence wasn't neutral anymore. It was pressure. I'm not going back and forth with you, Crowley said. You were asked a simple question. And we gave you a simple answer, Jaron replied. Crowley's eyes flicked down to the table, then back up. He wasn't listening anymore. He was deciding. You're making this harder than it needs to be. Alonzo finally shifted slightly in his seat, not defensive, just adjusting, like he was preparing for where this was going. No, he said calmly, you are. That landed. Crowley turned his attention to him fully now. Excuse me? Alonzo didn't raise his voice. You approached us without cause. You're asking for identification without explaining why. That's not standard procedure. A chair scraped softly somewhere behind them as someone shifted to get a better view. Crowley gave a short, humorless smile. You telling me how to do my job? Jaron answered before Alonzo could. No, we're asking you to follow it. That did it. Crowley's expression hardened completely now. The restraint he had left was gone. You know what, he said, stepping back just enough to look at both of them. I don't like your attitude. Jaron didn't respond. He pointed toward the aisle beside the table. I told you to stand up. Still, nothing. That refusal, quiet as it was, shifted the entire situation. From a nearby booth, a man slowly lifted his phone, angling it just enough. He wasn't obvious about it, but he wasn't hiding it either. Crowley noticed. His jaw tightened again, but instead of backing off, it pushed him further. "All right," he muttered, more to himself than to them. Then louder, "Let's try this again." He reached down suddenly and grabbed the back of Jaren's chair, pulling it slightly away from the table with a sharp scrape against the floor. "Stand up." Jaren looked up at him, steady. "You don't need to put your hands on anything." Crowley ignored that completely. Alonzo's voice came in calm but firmer now. "Sheriff, this is unnecessary." Crowley turned toward him again. "Quick, you don't get to decide that." The room felt smaller now, tighter. The waitress had stopped moving entirely, standing near the counter, watching. Jaren slowly pushed his chair back himself this time, not because he was complying, but because the situation had already crossed a line. He stood up. Alonzo followed a second later, both calm, both composed, and that seemed to irritate Crowley even more. He stepped closer again, now face to face with Jaren. "You see how easy that was?" Jaren didn't flinch. "We escalated this, not us." Crowley leaned in slightly, his voice dropping lower. "No," he said, "you did that the second you decided not to cooperate." Another pause. Then his eyes moved between them again, slower this time, more deliberate, like he was looking for something to justify what came next. His hand hovered briefly near his belt, not drawing anything, just enough to send a message. And in that moment, it was clear. This wasn't about questions anymore. It wasn't about identification. It had become something else entirely. Crowley took one small step closer. "Now," he said quietly, "we're going to figure out exactly what you two are doing here." And this time, it didn't sound like a question. The words didn't come with a raised voice, but the meaning was clear. Jaren Hayes stood still, shoulders relaxed, eyes locked on Sheriff Harlan Crowley. "We already told you," he said. "You're the one turning this into something else." Crowley's stare didn't break. If anything, it sharpened. "Yeah, that's what you think." He shifted slightly, glancing at the table, half-finished plates, drinks still sitting where they'd been untouched since he walked over. Then his hand moved, slow at first. He reached toward one of the coffee mugs sitting near the edge of the table. No one spoke. The movement was small, but everyone saw it. The waitress near the counter straightened up slightly like she was about to step in, then stopped herself. A man recording from the booth leaned forward just a little more. Crowley picked up the cup. Jaren's eyes followed it. "What are you doing?" Crowley didn't answer. For a split second it looked like he might set it back down. Then he tilted it. The coffee spilled forward, dark, steady, soaking into the front of Jaren's shirt. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't rushed. It was deliberate. The entire diner froze. A fork dropped somewhere behind them, the sound too loud in the silence that followed. Jaren didn't move right away. He looked down at his shirt, the liquid spreading through the fabric, then slowly lifted his head back up. His expression hadn't changed. If anything, it was calmer. "You just made this worse," he said quietly. Crowley exhaled through his nose, like he'd been waiting for a reaction that never came. "Maybe now you'll start taking this seriously." Alonzo stepped forward slightly, positioning himself just enough to be closer to Jaren, but not between them. His voice was controlled but firm. "That was unnecessary, and you know it." Crowley turned toward him sharply. "Stay out of it. I'm already in it." That pause hit harder than anything else. Crowley looked between them again, something in his expression shifting, not uncertainty, not yet, but something less stable than before. Still, he pushed forward. He stepped in again, closer than before, reaching out, this time grabbing Jaren's arm just above the elbow. "Let's go," You're done standing here." Jaron didn't pull away, but his voice dropped sharper now. "Take your hand off me." Crowley tightened his grip slightly. "You don't give instructions here." From the booth, the phone recording was now fully visible. No one was pretending anymore. The entire room was watching. Alonzo's voice came again, steady but unmistakably firm. "Sheriff, you're crossing a line." Crowley didn't let go. In fact, his grip held for another second longer, like he needed to prove something. Then Jaron spoke again, slower this time. "Listen carefully, because this is the part where you stop." Crowley's eyes narrowed. "Or what?" he asked. Jaron didn't raise his voice, didn't step back, didn't react to the coffee still soaking into his shirt. He just looked at him, direct, certain, and said, "You're about to make a mistake you won't recover from." For a second, Sheriff Harlan Crowley didn't react. Then he let out a short, dismissive breath, still holding Jaron Hayes's arm. "You've been saying that since I walked over here." Jaron's eyes didn't move. "No, I've been giving you chances." That line landed differently. Crowley's grip loosened, just slightly, not enough to let go, but enough to show hesitation. From the booth, the phone was still recording, clear angle, clear audio. Alonzo Whitaker stepped closer now, not aggressive, but present. "This needs to stop, right now," he said. Crowley looked between them again, something unsettled creeping in, but instead of stepping back, he doubled down. "You don't get to tell me what needs to stop, not in my county." Jaron nodded once, like he expected that answer. "All right," he said quietly, "then let's be clear about what you've already done." Crowley's jaw tightened. "What I've done is my job." "No," Jaron replied. "You targeted us. You questioned us without cause. You demanded identification without justification, and then you put your hands on me." Crowley scoffed. "You're making this sound like something it's not." Jaron didn't blink. "It's exactly what it is." That pause came back, longer this time. Crowley's eyes shifted briefly, toward the phone recording, toward the people watching, then back to them. For the first time, there was a crack, small, but there. Jaron took a step forward, not into him, but enough to close the distance. His voice stayed low, controlled. "You didn't see two people having lunch, you saw what you wanted to see." Crowley didn't respond, because now he was listening. Alonzo spoke next, and when he did, the tone changed completely. "I'm going to give you one opportunity," he said, calm but firm. "Remove your hand, step back, and end this interaction." Crowley looked at him, trying to read him now instead of dominate him. "Or what?" he asked again, but this time it didn't carry the same weight. Alonzo didn't raise his voice. "I'm Judge Alonzo Whitaker." Silence. It wasn't immediate shock. It was confusion first. Crowley blinked once like he misheard it. "What?" Jaron didn't give him time to process it. "And I'm Jaron Hayes," he added, steady, civil rights attorney. That hit harder. Crowley's hand dropped. Not fast, not dramatic, but it dropped. His eyes moved between them again, slower now, searching for something that told him this wasn't real. "You expect me to believe that?" he said, but there was no confidence behind it. Jaron gestured slightly, not to himself, but to the room. "You don't have to believe anything. It's already been recorded." Every head in the diner turned slightly toward the phone. The man holding it didn't lower it, didn't hide it. Crowley followed their gaze, and that's when it fully registered. Everything, the questions, the tone, the contact, the coffee, all of it, caught, documented, and now attached to names that carried weight. Crowley looked back at them, but this time there was no authority in it, just calculation. "You should have said that from the start," he muttered. Jaron's expression didn't change. "You shouldn't need that information to treat people right." That was it. No raised voices, no sudden movement, just a shift so clear the entire room felt it. Crowley stepped back, finally creating space, but it was too late. Alonzo adjusted his sleeve slightly, eyes still on him. "This isn't over," he said. And for the first time since he walked over, Crowley didn't have a response. He stepped back once more, creating distance like he was trying to reset the situation, but nothing about it could be reset anymore. Too many people had seen it. Too much had already happened. The diner stayed quiet. Jaron Hayes reached for a napkin, calmly pressing it against his shirt, not rushing, not reacting beyond what was necessary. Alonzo Whitaker remained standing beside him, composed, watching Crowley without saying anything else. That silence did more damage than any argument could have. Crowley glanced around the room again. People weren't looking away anymore. The man with the phone kept recording. The waitress, still near the counter, wasn't pretending to be busy now. She was just watching. Crowley shifted his weight, adjusting his stance like he was trying to regain control of a situation that had already slipped past him. "All right," he said, clearing his throat slightly. "This doesn't need to go any further." No one responded. Jaron folded the napkin once, then set it down on the table. "It already has," he said. Crowley's jaw tightened again, but this time there was no aggression behind it, just pressure building in a different direction. "You made your point. Let's not turn this into something bigger than it is." Alonzo finally moved, stepping forward just slightly. "That decision isn't yours anymore." Another pause. Crowley looked at him, then at Jaron, then briefly at the phone again. That phone had become the center of everything. "What do you want?" Crowley asked. It came out lower than before, controlled, but different. Jaron didn't hesitate. Accountability. That word landed heavier than anything else. Crowley exhaled slowly, running a hand along his jaw. "You're really going to push this?" Jaron held his gaze. "You already pushed it." From outside, the faint sound of a vehicle pulling up cut through the silence. Then another. Crowley noticed it immediately. So did everyone else. He turned his head slightly toward the windows, just enough to see the movement of patrol units pulling into the lot. Backup, but not in the way he expected. The man recording shifted position, angling his phone toward the entrance now. Crowley looked back at them, something unsettled behind his eyes now. "This isn't necessary," he said again, but it sounded more like he was trying to convince himself. Alonzo's voice stayed even. "It became necessary the moment you crossed the line." The diner door opened. 2 deputies stepped in, slower than usual, scanning the room, already aware something wasn't right. Their eyes landed on Crowley first, then moved to Jaron, then to Alonzo, and then to the phone. They didn't speak immediately. That hesitation said everything. Crowley straightened slightly, instinct kicking in. "I've got it handled," he said. Neither deputy moved. One of them glanced again at the man recording, then back at Crowley. "Sir," he started, careful with his tone, "we're getting calls." Crowley's expression tightened. "Calls about what?" The deputy hesitated for a half second. "About this." Silence. Heavy. Unavoidable. Crowley didn't respond right away, because now it wasn't just inside the diner anymore. It had already started spreading. Jaron picked up his jacket slowly, still calm, still composed. "Like I said," he murmured, almost to himself, "you should have stopped earlier." Crowley didn't look at him, didn't say anything, because for the first time, he understood exactly what that meant, and there was no walking it back. The room didn't move. Not really. Even as the 2 deputies stood near the entrance, even as the low murmur of voices started building outside the diner, everything inside still felt locked in that moment. Sheriff Harlan Crowley remained where he was, no longer in control, no longer directing anything, just standing there, watching the situation shift around him. One of the deputies stepped forward carefully. "Sheriff, We're going to need to step outside." Crowley didn't answer immediately. His eyes moved once more across the room, past the tables, past the faces, past the phone still pointed in his direction, before settling briefly on Jaron Hayes, then Alonzo Whitaker. There was no defiance left in it, just tension. "Yeah," he muttered finally. "All right." He walked toward the door without another word, and just like that, the presence that had controlled the entire room minutes ago was gone. Outside, the parking lot had already started to fill. 2 patrol units, a third pulling in, a few bystanders standing at a distance, phones out. Word had spread faster than anyone expected. Inside, the atmosphere shifted, not back to normal, just different. The waitress finally moved again, stepping closer to the table. "Are you okay?" she asked Jaron, glancing at the stain on his shirt. "I'm fine," Jaron replied calmly. Alonzo adjusted his sleeve, looking toward the window for a brief second before turning back. "This won't stay here," he said. Jaron gave a small nod. It shouldn't. From the booth, the man recording lowered his phone slightly but didn't stop the video. "Y'all might want this," he said, stepping closer. "I got the whole thing." Jaron looked at him. "Hold on to it. You'll be contacted." The man nodded, understanding immediately. By the end of the week, the footage was everywhere. Local stations picked it up first, then regional coverage, then national outlets. The clip didn't need explanation. It showed everything clearly. The approach, the tone, the escalation, the coffee, the contact, and the moment it all unraveled. An internal investigation was opened within 48 hours. Prior complaints, ones that had been ignored or dismissed, were pulled back into review. Patterns that once had been overlooked were now impossible to ignore. Sheriff Harlan Crowley was placed on administrative leave, then suspended, then terminated. There was no dramatic press conference, no public statement from him, just a quiet confirmation from the department and a case file that grew larger by the day. Days later, Jaron and Alonzo sat in a different setting, quieter, controlled. No tension, no eyes watching. "Funny how it always starts the same way," Jaron said, leaning back slightly. Alonzo nodded once. "And it ends the same way too, when it's finally seen." A brief pause, then Jaron added, "This time, it didn't get ignored." Alonzo looked at him. "That's the difference." What happened inside that diner wasn't new, it wasn't rare, but this time, it didn't go unnoticed. And for Sheriff Harlan Crowley, that made all the difference. If you made it this far, you already know, stories like this aren't just stories. They happen, and too often, they go unseen. Subscribe to the channel for more real, intense breakdowns like this, because the truth deserves to be told, and moments like this deserve to be seen.